All right, thanks for sticking with us, everybody. These crucial conversations, many times, right, they're so vitally important, but emotionally, we want to avoid them a lot of times. Now, there's some people out there go straight at them, but there's many leaders who even back away, thinking, "Oh, this is just going to resolve itself." Intentional communication requires a proactive, intentional, deliberate approach. I really feel the more deliberate and intentional we are, either in what we believe about the situation and tactically how we approach it, will really create the ease in which we can flow through it. So that it doesn't feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. We intentionally go into it a certain way with a certain mindset and a certain belief and a certain tactical way of doing it. So let me bring Vicki Wright Hamilton on. Vicki, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Todd?
I'm so good. Vicki, you are so good at helping us get tactical in these scenarios. So these crucial, critical conversations, whether home, business, there's so many different varieties. You can go in whichever direction you like. Help us not avoid them. Help us not run away from them, first of all.
Well, let's first understand what causes us to run. It's all based on fear. The fear of will someone be upset? The fear of what is it going to do to our relationship? The fear of rejection? The fear of I'm not going to deliver it correctly? A lot of it is based on fear. And the thing is that when we begin to think about crucial conversations, I think it's important for us to consider before we ever get ready to sit down and have a conversation with someone, we need to put ourselves in their shoes. Now, as we are all individuals, we hear this all the time. No two people made alike. Everybody has their own journey. But sometimes it's hard for us to remember that when we're very passionate about something or how we feel about something. So what happens is that we go in, I'm passionate, I'm passionate, I'm passionate. They got to come to my side. It's got to be this way. This is really critical to the outcome of what we want to do. Before we get to that point, I always say first, step back and breathe. Let's take a breath. Let's understand, why is this conversation crucial? What happens if it doesn't go well? What are the consequences that are going to happen if I don't address this issue? So let me write down all those things that could potentially happen if I don't address them. What's the criticality of it? Because I need to understand that. Then I need to understand what's in it that they want. Why are they fighting me against this? What is their thought process? Have I taken the time to listen, to learn, to understand their thought process? Why we're having this agreement and we're not getting along, or we're having this challenge that's going to cause this critical conversation to come forward. And once I can begin to understand, then the third thing I have to do is change my language, because language becomes very critical in a crucial conversation. Things like, so what I have observed, what I am hearing you say, I understand, but have you thought about it from this perspective? What would happen if we tried? I'm not sure that I'm clear. The most powerful word in the English language is I, because nobody can tell you how you feel, what you think, but you. So if it's, I may have misunderstood, but I understood it to be, I am having a difficulty with X. I'm not sure that I agree with Y because of Z reason. Am I understanding you correctly? Am I missing something? Did I miss something in what I understood? So let's get to a common ground first to establish that we're on the same page. Then we can begin to talk about specific experiences.
One thing I really love about the approach you just laid out is, our emotional, if we just go straight emotion and attack it, we're going to end up talking at the person.
That's right.
So by checking our emotions first, like you said, I mean, I felt it when you said that. Just first take a deep breath, get into their shoes. What are they looking for? And then you opened a dialogue. You didn't recommend just talking at them. Here's my bullet points, and here's what you need to understand. It's you created a dialogue for them to talk back what you said. Did you think about this? What does this make you think? And it's just creating that openness. I love that. Okay, so once they've begun to have this dialogue with us, where do we go from there?
So that dialogue sets the foundation of the continued moments of that conversation. So, I always like to think when I think about business, I think about two different kinds of crucial conversations. We all know that sometimes we might have a conversation that's performance based. And when it's performance based, it's always hard because we know we have to tell an employee if they're not performing and not meeting standards, why they're not meeting those standards. The thing that we have to do when we have those crucial conversations is come with facts and behaviors, not perceptions and opinions. It's facts and behaviors, not perception or opinions. So when you can show them examples where it is fact that this occurred, they can't fute that this is what happened. When you're able to show it was the behavior you demonstrated by doing X, you're giving them very specific feedback. And that specific feedback is what they hold on to. That's why you don't wait until if something goes wrong, you address that bad behavior right then and there.
Mhm.
You address what you saw right then and there. You do not let time go by. So it's facts and behaviors, not opinions and values.
And from a communication standpoint, it's avoiding I feel like you are, instead of it's do you see XYZ, or when this occurred, this happened.
Mhm.
So you're pointing at those, because then it's not you coming with all the authority. You're holding up something for them to evaluate.
Exactly. So when you start to talk about professional conversations, that's what's important. Now, let's think about I'm talking to someone at business and it's a difference of opinion. I think we ought to go A. I think we ought to go B.
Yeah.
And the idea of, as we talk about I and understanding the power of I, will help me, I, understand your thought process of why you believe it should be X. And what is the outcome that you're expecting to get from X? And why is that outcome important for where you sit, right? For the thing you're trying to do. Why is that important? What does that look like? Likewise, in my position, I care about X for Y reason. Here's what's important to me and the implications to it. And here are the consequences if this doesn't happen that I am protecting against. Now, I always like to use an example here that a lot of people can relate to. How many of us have worked in a company and it got time for our internal audit to come in? Oh my God, it was like, oh my God, they're going to ask me all these questions. They're going to send me through the roof. I don't want to deal with audit. It's always blah, 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 blah. And if I don't get it right, it's on me. They're just doing their job. They were hired to be an auditor. They were hired to do these things. They're probably compensated on how many errors they're able to find when they do audits. So understand where they're sitting, understand why they're sitting there and what's going through their lens. They want to perform, they want to maximize on their performance. So it's not personal. They're doing their job. So what happens is our lens of negativity and rejection and emotion overrules anything that they try to do versus they're doing their job. This is what they're asked to do. Now I can combat my negative feelings of what they're asking me to do if I do my job and do it right. If I'm able to provide the right information, the right data, and I'm doing the things that the way that they're supposed to be done. But a lot of times when we go into business and we're trying to make things happen and we're coming from two different perspectives, we're not thinking about what they get rewarded off of. The Whipham station again, that favorite frequency, what's in it for me? If you do this, how you gonna harm me? That's what I care about. Self-preservation first. So understanding that, let's understand where they're coming from and what's happening. And that's why critical conversations, crucial conversations are so important, because we don't take the time necessarily to think about that first. We're reactionary. We're not being proactive, we're being reactive. We're not thinking about the other side, we're thinking about self, us, what's happening to me, what this means, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when you stick with facts, you stick with behaviors, you stick with presentable outcomes that you can show why, how, when, where, and what, it's an easier conversation to have.
It
And
absolutely is.
when people start to talk, oh, I see your behavior did this or your behavior did that, people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, let me show you. In the meeting, this happened and you did this. And everybody was like, they're sticking their nose up at us. Now, whether you meant to do it or not, that was what you did. So if you could stop doing this, people would not think you're sticking their nose up at them when you really aren't. But it was that behavior that indicated that.
That is powerful. And so it begins with checking your emotions and then getting in their shoes. And you do that specifically by creating that dialogue where you hear from them, they hear from you, whether those different types of conversations, those are vital elements of getting through these conversations. So I don't feel like I have to run anymore. Thank you so much, Vicki.
No problem. And the other thing I think that's really important, the other thing I was going to mention is we all have to have clear expectations.
Yeah.
Because whether you're at home or whether you're at work, we have crucial conversations regardless. When I'm having a crucial conversation with my husband and I'm talking about stuff, I go in with what's happening, what's occurring. But the expectation was that we were going to get X. Well, if we're not in agreement what that expectation was to begin with, we're already on two opposite sides.
Okay, time out. We need to do this after the break. So, Vicki, stick with us, and let's talk about how to set expectations in a crucial conversation. All right, everybody, stick with us. Hey, we got to figure out how to set expectations. So, essentially, that will lay out the pathway for this conversation. Stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for sticking with us. I'm glad you did. So we talked about some critical elements of checking your ego and your emotions at the door, and then creating that dialogue with the person so that you're heard, they're heard, and you're basing everything off of facts and not feelings. Those are critical elements of how to get through the conversation. But now through it communicates a direction. We need to know how to set the direction of this conversation so that one, they don't feel sideswiped and like, wait, what we're having what conversation for what? And then all of a sudden the defensive walls are up. So let me bring Vicki back on. Vicki, man, okay, so I had to bring you back right after the commercial because you dangled that out right at the end of the segment on setting expectations. I'm like, oh no, I need to hear more about that. Setting expectations. Tell me what you mean.
So here's the deal. Every time you're going to have a conversation, a communication is a two-way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to the person that is communicating to you to make sure you understood what was being said, right? Mm-hmm. So affirm and clarify is very important. Mm-hmm. Well, before we ever begin, when we talk about expectations, what are you expecting from me? What am I expecting from you? What do we expect from the situation? What are we looking to accomplish? Mm-hmm. So if we don't have common goals, if we don't have common thoughts at the onset of what we're trying to reach, what are the outcomes we want to come to, then it's very hard for us to have a conversation because I might think you wanted to go A, you might think we wanted to go B, and what ends up happening is we were going in two different situations.
We're just spinning in circles.
And we're just spinning in circles. And then you wonder why we can't have a conversation. So I always think it's important that before you begin to have a conversation, say, you know what? I would like to get alignment here. It is my understanding that we're looking for X, we're looking to accomplish Y, just want to make sure that you're in agreement. And the more we confirm and clarify, get alignment first, before things happen proactively, the less we have to get into the combative conversations, because we all know what the goal is. It may just be the pathway and how we get there that we're going to discuss as to which way is the best pathway. But we all understand what that ultimate goal is. But if you don't understand what's ultimately being asked to be done, then you're not going to go in the same direction.
Okay, so walk me through just a little bit more detailed on how they actually do that. Because like I said, initially when a person's, the boss or the leader sits down and they've got that look on their face, everyone knows that look on their face, or that cue of, hey, can you come to my office? Oh gosh, here we go. There's emotion that person's walking in with. So how do you set that clear expectation and lower that emotion level so their ears actually turn on instead of, putting that wall up?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, Todd, because sometimes there's many times you get called to the boss's office and say, oh, I'd like to talk to you. Well, can you tell me what this is in reference to, right? Because you want to begin to set, okay, what am I walking into? What does this mean? And sometimes it's like, no, I just need you to walk in. I just need to have a meeting with you. And they'll spring something up on you. I needed to let you know X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong, again, with using that power of I. Stop. Before we get started, I'm a little confused. I thought we were trying to go here. I thought we were trying to go there. When was the decision made, or what did I miss in this decision being made as to where we're going to go? Now, there are always times that decisions are made that you have no power, no control, and there's nothing you can do about it. When those kinds of things happen and you're walking into an office, that might be your manager saying to you, look, we're going to outsource your position no longer exists. And we're going to, so X is going to be your last day. We're doing this as we're trying to refine our financial outcomes for where we're trying to go. Now, that doesn't feel good, but that's not a conversation. That's information. So let's make sure we understand the difference between information and a conversation. A conversation is when you have an opportunity to say input. Information is when you're told this is what's going to happen, why it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and you really don't have a voice at that table. That's when it's very hard, because you can't get those emotions in line because you don't have an opportunity, nor are you going to have a say about it. But when you begin to have these conversations as a two-way street, so that's what it is. A conversation is back and forth. If I'm talking to my husband and we made a decision, we're going to put $1,000 away for Christmas, and I'm out here spending money crazy, and we don't have $1,000, he's going to come back to me and say, wait a minute, I thought we said we were going to put $1,000 in for Christmas. So where are we going wrong here? What possessed you to have to go do A, B, C, and D? But that's because the expectation was clear. I knew where I was going. So it's always important to understand a conversation is a two-way street. Information is, I'm telling you.
That's a great distinction. So these expectations, is it drawing back to what our original goals were, and then you're inspecting what you expect? Yes. So are you pulling that in order to set the crucial the path of the conversation? Absolutely. Is that like the anchor?
Absolutely. And you use those pieces in your conversation because they were part of that journey of getting there. So you incorporate those pieces.
I got you, which goes into the intentional step of making sure you communicate clearly what those goals and outcomes that you're looking for, expectations on the front end, and you're continually reminding them. But let's say this is a course correction, not notifying that your position is being outsourced, but maybe something organic that's kind of come up on the fly, maybe a crucial conversation based off of they had a bad client interaction, or they spoke poorly to a team member. How do you set expectations of that conversation?
So I think it all goes back again, right? So if we get to the behavior. So you had a customer conversation and it went something like this, right? And that behavior saying X, Y, Z is not what we do. Remember, our values are A, B, C, and D, or what we set out as the group that we want to do is A, B, and C, and these don't align. This is where you're talking about behaviors not matching what that expectation is, and showing them what that means. So in the future, I need to make sure that when you're talking to a customer or a client and you run against this problem, we always keep in mind this. And here's a way you may want to potentially, solve that or move in that direction. So it's really important. Again, when you're talking about corrective action, we're talking about corrective behaviors. And so you address that corrective at that point, you give them what that corrective behavior is, but you remind them again, how did we get to whether this was a wrong behavior or not? You remind them of what that precedent was as to what got you there so that you stay in the path of that direction and don't veer. And that's how we make sure we keep that alignment. That's where alignment comes in. That
Yeah.
constant reminder of alignment, right? So we have expectations, but let's sure we keep an alignment so that we can get to the same outcome that we want to reach.
And that even goes back to what you talked about in the last segment in terms of this isn't I feel statements. This isn't your interpretation of their life and their personhood. This is you anchoring back to the alignment questions, the data and the facts that have already been stated. And then it can be that dialogue, like you said. So if our value is this, and then this occurred, what's another way you could portray that value if you ran into this situation again? How would you want to do that again? I love the question. If you had the ability to push the reset button, how would you replay the situation?
Mm-hmm.
And just allow that dialogue to actually occur. You know what I love, Vicki, about this tact that you're laying out on this crucial conversation is you're able to be yourself as a leader. I was coaching a leader not too long ago, and she came down harshly on somebody with a corrective behavior. It was contrary to her normal personality and behavior, but it's what she felt like a leader was supposed to be. But this dialogue allows them to really be themselves.
And being authentic is so important. And when you talk about being who she thinks she's supposed to be, that's a whole nother conversation around culture and
Yeah.
culture and expectations, which is a whole dialogue about what that means. But if we are allowed, and remember, I need to be authentically me. I can deliver bad news by being authentically me.
Absolutely.
I can deliver information about what wasn't pleasant being authentically me. But I should not ever feel like I have to be someone else. The reality is that's not the way a lot of people feel because they're trying to fit within a culture or fit the expectations, which is why those expectations are so important, not only in terms of outcome, but behaviors and values, etc.
I mean, we can connect with those long-term goals, visions, pillars. We connected with them on the front end because we chose that position. We're already connected there. Nobody connects with a fake person. Nobody connects with a false personality that has that wall, but people do connect one human to another. So if we're intentionally lowering our emotions, having a dialogue, being a real authentic person, it changes the expectation conversation. Even if I completely messed up, if you are being an authentic, normal human who cares about people with me, I'm going to receive that completely different.
And let me leave your audience with one last thing. I always say that when you make a mistake, put the elephant out in the room. Go in and own it. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done so and so and so and so. I apologize. Here's why I did it. And here's what I'm going to do to correct it again. Because it's hard to argue when you've already said, I made a mistake. So I always say, get the elephant out the room. If you know it, if your boss calling you to the office and they're going to talk to you about a bad behavior, you say, look, I know what you're going to talk to me about. I get it. I'm sorry. I did this. This is what was going on. Here's what I really meant. I apologize. And here's what I'm going to do to correct it. And what I'm going to make sure I don't do again so it doesn't happen. But get the elephant out the room. Own it. Own it. We're all human.
Yeah.
And we would rather own our mistakes as well as what we've done well.
Right? And that takes a lot of the air out of the balloon right there. And because it removes the manager's feeling that he has to convince you of something if you already know. Vicki, thank you so much. Your insight is so powerful. not only giving us the big picture, these philosophies, but these tactical how to from such a unique perspective. Thank you so much for the time, Vicki.
Thank you so much, Todd. It was a pleasure.
I love it. All right, that wraps us up, everybody. I hope you see now a path of not only what are these crucial conversations, but how can we get through them. I love you. Let's stick to this. Let's find the intentional path that leads to the breakthrough that you're looking for.